chance to study what nigiri looks like, I'm seeing some have seaweed wrapped around the middle, and they have a pretty big block of rice they're on and a thin little piece of fish. So I'm getting an idea, just studying what it looks like. I think I like the idea of the seaweed wrapped around it. I think I can create an icon that looks like, just like this one right here. I think we can do something like that. So let me keep that reference photo. Let's make, so this is very simplified. So let's do a very simplified version of this. So let's get our rounded rectangle tool and do our bed of rice. And that's a pill shape, so we can extend that out and make that a little less like a pill. We could take the curvature tool, that's a kind of an unnatural shape. So let's kind of make it a little more natural looking. And then we can do a piece of fish. We can do the rounded rectangle tool on top. That'll be a little slice of fish. Let's round those corners, but not a whole lot, just a little bit. Nice square piece of fish. And now we need to do the little seaweed wrapper. So we can do the seaweed wrapper, it can go right over top. And that could be the same color as the background, just like this. Bring this up and out. We can always use the shape builder tool to carve that out. We could do horizontal lines to indicate the striations you see in raw sushi. So creating a diagonal line and just holding down Option and duplicating it. Because before it didn't quite, I really want it to look like nigiri. I don't want it to not look like that. So this is a straight line. Everything has a slight bend to it. So let's keep the same curvature tool and just add a little bit of just a tiny little bend so it looks more natural, like it's curving around to wrap around the sushi. And so when I zoom out, here's the problem. I'm zooming out those little details, the striations on the sushi, they look almost, you can't even tell what it is. It looks like a mistake. So it's not too simple. So what we need to do is probably get rid of that little detail. So what I may have to do is, since that's not looking at all like nigiri, I'm going to have to go to a thick stroke kind of illustration just like this right here. So instead of doing a solid shape, let me see if I can't do a stroke and get the top. I need a little contrast between the sushi on top and the bottom. So let's add a stroke there. So just changing it to a stroke kind of helps define the outlines a little bit. Let's make the seaweed smaller. So there's nigiri, and then we need to do sashimi, which is really just fish. It's just fish. So that's going to be a little bit harder to illustrate. We could do it a couple ways. We can get our pen tool, and we could do it like this. So we have these different icons, and we just need to make sure everything feels balanced with them, that they're all appropriately sized with each other. That may mean making some of these smaller and tucking it inside, and making these all a little smaller compared to the chopsticks. So now we want to do Sushi Club around it. So we're going to do that next, and we're going to get our Ellipse tool, and we're going to do our type on path. And let's type out Sushi Club. So one thing I noticed is this feels so tight up top. So let me just kind of change the angle of these just slightly. I think that looks better. And let's change the shadow that's casted. Let's have this be kind of a diagonal, almost like drawing a triangle. And it looks like the shadows casted down. So let's do our typography. We did a ellipse tool, and we just did a simple type on path tool, and I just wrote out the name Sushi Club. So let's figure out typefaces. So let's try a slab typeface. What I love about slabs is they have equal contrast throughout the characters, and I think it adds a nice consistency. I think it would work really well with this brand. So there's one, I can even go to my filters and filter it out. There's my slabs. There's one I really like, and it's Roboto. Let's see if I can't find it. Let's do it thick enough where we can see it. So let's do a slab bold. And so there's a lot of things we can try. We can try all uppercase. We could try wide spacing between the characters. Let's see what an all caps with wide spacing looks like, because that's a very nice, when you put wide spacing with large capital letters, it gives it a nice elegant look. So let's do a nice wide spacing. Let's do something really dramatic. Let's try 500. And we need to go up and go to character and do our drop down menu and make sure it's all caps. So that's very, very dramatic. And what's great about having wide spacing between all capital letters is I can make it a lot smaller so that the type does not overwhelm, the type size doesn't overwhelm my icons, because we want everything to be balanced. And instead of continuing to type on this line, I want to create a new circle, because if I were to type on this line and keep going, and it keeps going along the line, it'll be upside down. So let's just duplicate this. And I teach this in my basic master classes, but I'm going to go through it again. I'm going to go over here, I'm going to reverse it. So instead of being on the outside, it's going to be on the inside of the circle. So I'm going to go around and see if I can see that little arrow down there? I'm going to click and hold and bring it on the inside. So now I can do our little tagline. And I decided to keep with that Montserrat typeface that we've been using, just to kind of be consistent. Once you like a typeface for a brand, you just continue to use it until you're told otherwise. So I thought that could look good. And I want to make sure these circles make a complete circle when put together. So I'm going to have a base circle. I'm going to make it a different color. Just making sure these match up really good. Right about there. So now I can bring in my little elements and make sure I have the right balance between everything. With everything, I love to duplicate it and tweak and find the right balance. This is what I had before. I thought that was the right balance, but once I increased the company name, I felt like that was being able to be seen first, and then authentically prepared was seen more as a tagline, which is the truth. So I felt like the one on the right worked better because Sushi Club was way more prominent. Even though I kind of like the icons, I did 2 different versions of each icon just to kind of see what I can do. And I kind of like the icons on the left better. So I can probably make a combination and get the icons on the left with the typography treatment and seal of the right. So we have a couple of great concepts developing. Let's do one more. There is this one with a knife I thought was really interesting. I didn't know if it was going to work or not, but let's try the one where it's just the knife and the S, and then let's try to do the one where it's kind of its own kind of typography based logo. So let's start off with the knife. So I'm going to get the pen tool and start doing the handle. I'm making sure I'm adding lots of curves to the handle. And now I'm going to trace around this S. Clicking and holding and getting my corners. And getting my S. And then I'm going to need to get a stroke. And then change the thickness. Maybe make it thicker and round the cap and round the join. I do that quite a bit. This gives it a nice soft appearance. So that looks really cool. Just real quickly sketching that out. The one I thought with the C in it looked neat, but I didn't think that was going to look too busy. So that's why I ended up picking this one. This is interesting because I think we can do something with the typography. We have an S here, and we could put sushi across here. We could just have this as an icon. So let's go ahead and let's do a Sushi Club. So if I had the company name, see the problem with this is very tall. So I'd probably have to eventually do the typography like this to be able to balance it out so it didn't look, wasn't a whole lot of white space on the top and bottom. It felt more balanced. And this could end up being a totally different typeface. I'm just doing something really quickly. So that's interesting. I don't know if it's worth pursuing further. I want to try this one before I move on. So this one will be a little bit more challenging. I might need to get the grid on this one. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn on the grid, view, show grid. I'm going to have my grid on. Just want to get a general idea. I'm going to see if I can't line it up on the grid, the illustration itself. And it was taking a screenshot on the grid, which is going to be kind of confusing. I don't want that old grid. There we go. That's pretty lined up. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to hold down Shift, just kind of trace all of this. Make sure that's a stroke. And I got my round cap and round join on. Okay, let's do the U. Let's do this S. And then club could probably just be typography, it doesn't have to be hand sketched. So let's see if I can't find one that has some good characteristics. So here's what I ended up with. I softened all the corners like I have been doing consistently through all these other concepts, and just put a, what is this called? Lolita 1 as a nice chunky contrast to the thinner strokes of the sushi. I think this is interesting. Once again, it has to be really obvious that that's a sushi knife, and I don't think it's obvious. I think there's ways I can maybe try to get that to work as more of a knife. Right now I don't think it's working. Perhaps this also needs to be a different color so that people really focus in on the knife like this. I think even the handle, see the handle, if I were to close up that handle, make it look more like a sushi handle, that's all great. It looks more like a knife, but then you lose the S. It's not an S anymore and needs to be very readable as a S. As cool as, I think this would make a great t-shirt, but I don't think it's going to make a great logo. And that's kind of the difference between being able to distinguish what's a good logo and what's a good illustration. And sometimes things are better off as illustrations, and other times it's better to be more simple with the logo. So as neat as that was, I don't know. We can continue to look at it, but for right now we have some very basic things outlined. This is kind of our process of what we did together. This is what I did when I was doing some planning for the course. As you can see, I was really trying to explore the knife concept more. I tried to even do a different version where the S was way more obvious and you can have a more distinct handle right here. And I even tried the one with the C. I pretty much vectorized everything just to kind of see which concepts I wanted to do. And what was great is once I sketched out a couple of knives and a couple of characters, I was able to combine a lot of those things to come up with different versions and variations of the same concept to see if they would work. So you could see how I laid down the knife with the S and tried to do a presentation here. And you could see how I did this kind of more youthful, funky typography up here, and then decided having some nice contrast between the lettering worked a little bit better to make it look more polished, which I think would be our target demographic would appreciate. We always got to think of that target person. We did not did all that research for nothing. We got to continually ground ourselves. And remember, we're not designing something that looks cool. We're designing something that's going to work for the target audience. So you could see all these different versions and iterations. Here's kind of the S that we discovered with the C, and then the S. You can see different combinations. That was actually a sketch I did and realized that would be really cool as a watermark. But as a standalone symbol, I felt like it just wasn't translating. So now that we have all of this, all of these vector assets that we can do, we need to be able to take our concepts and to refine them further to see which ones make the cut. Because with the client, we want to present 2 to 3 great concepts. And I'm going to go over in the next lesson, when do we know which ones are the right ones to present to a client and how do I go about choosing those? It's a very important question. We're going to address that next.